Welcome to Learn This Game, where you can learn about board games and how they are played. Today, we'll be looking at Khe Sanh 68. In this video, there'll be a general description and overview of the game. We'll inventory the components, and we'll go through gameplay, including setup, one complete sample turn consisting of 12 phases, and victory conditions. In the description, there'll be some helpful links. There is also a timestamp index so you can navigate directly to any part of the presentation. If you want to skip this introduction and go straight to the setup and gameplay, you can go to the timestamp index now in the description. And if you find this video helpful, please like, subscribe, and share. You can also leave a comment to share your experience with this game, or let us know what game you'd like to see reviewed. Khe Sanh 68 was published by Decision Games in 2015 and designed by Joseph Miranda. In this historical war game, you are in command of the US and South Vietnamese forces who must keep the United States Marine firebase at Khe Sanh from being overrun by the North Vietnamese. An app is not required and there are no standalone apps. The publisher did not provide an age recommendation, but the difficulty level was listed as very low and each game takes 1 to 2 hours to play. The game is designed for solitaire play. There are no multiplayer rules. If you enjoyed this game, you may also enjoy Suez 56, also designed by Joseph Miranda and another entry in the Cold War Blitz series. Cold War Blitz is a solitaire game system in which the player takes command of a military operation during the era of 1946 to 1990. And if you find this video helpful, Learn This Game has additional instructional videos for Decision Games products, including Vikings, Congo Merc, and Long Range Desert Group. Links are in the description. Now that you've seen a brief introduction to the game, let's get into the game itself. Khe Sanh 68 is a solitaire card-driven combat game that also uses dice, counters, and a point-to-point map. Thematically, the game covers regiment and brigade-level combat between the Communist and US Allied forces during the Vietnam War. The game is meant to be historically accurate. Now let's see how to win the game. If at any time during the game there are any Communist units in the Khe Sanh firebase space, and there are no Allied ground units also present in the space, the game ends immediately as a strategic defeat. If the Allies do not experience a strategic defeat and make it to the end of the game after all the turns have been completed, victory is determined by victory points per the victory point schedule in the scenario rules. The Allies gain victory points by occupying spaces at the end of the game and eliminating Communist units. A space is considered occupied by the Allies if at least one Allied unit occupies it at the end of the game. Now let's review the components. This game includes the 4-page Cold War Blitz system rules and one double-sided page for the scenario rules. The system rules apply to all games in the Cold War Blitz system, and the scenario rules apply to this game only. The scenario rules contain several tables you will need during gameplay. There are also 40 counters that represent the Communist forces using red counters and the Allied forces using green counters. There are also 2 blue counters representing the South Vietnamese forces. Here is a brief overview of the units in the game. The top number indicates the size of the unit. The image shows the unit type. The unit's name is on the right side. A white arrow indicates that this is a Special Forces unit. The bottom numbers show the firepower and movement of the unit. Air units include a B-52 airstrike and a regular airstrike. There are 3 types of helicopter units: gunships, transports, and recon. The numbers on the airstrike and helicopter units represent their firepower. Enemy anti-aircraft artillery is represented by the symbol on this counter. Some Allied counters are double-sided. These are known as 2-step units. If these units receive an elimination result in combat, they are flipped over instead of being removed from play. They are removed from play if they are eliminated again. There are no double-sided enemy units. There is one 11 by 17 inch unmounted point-to-point map. Each inch represents 260 yards. There are a total of 18 cards. 9 are Allied cards used by the player. The other 9 are enemy cards known as Opposition Force or OPFOR cards. All cards are numbered for inventory purposes on the bottom right. Also required but not included are 1 or more 6-sided dice. The more the better. Now let's set up the game for our playthrough. We will be playing one complete turn which consists of 12 phases. First, we place the map in the play area. We then place the Allied cards nearby. They do not have to be shuffled or placed face down since the player will be able to select any one by choice during the appropriate phase. We then shuffle and place the opposition force cards face down in a single stack. We then place a 6-sided dice nearby. We then refer to Section 13 in the scenario rules to determine initial unit placement. First, we place the communist units. We place all of the red enemy units face down and shuffle them. We will place the indicated number of units face down in the designated spaces. This will contribute to the fog of war. Enemy units are only revealed when an ally unit enters their space, when an air unit is placed in their space to conduct a mission, or is triggered by a card. We then place our allied units onto the map. We place the 101st Airborne Special Forces unit in the indicated allied firebase near the Laos border. 6 allied units are then listed in the scenario rules to be placed in the 3 spaces: Hill 861, the Rock Quarry, and the Khe Sanh firebase. We can place our 6 units in any of these spaces as long as there is at least 1 unit in each space. In the Allied Air Available box at the bottom left of the map, we place the following units: the B-52 airstrike, 4 regular airstrike units, 1 AC-47, and 1 helicopter transport. The remaining Allied units are placed in the Allied reinforcement box on the map. We then place the turn marker on 9 on the turn record track. We will refer to page 2 of the main rules to keep track of the turn sequence, which consists of these 12 phases. Now let's see how the game is played. The first phase is the friendly action card phase. In the first phase, we can examine all of the available Allied cards and select any one of our choice. We select the Allied build-up card. All Allied cards indicate at the top right the cost and turns if this card is used. So in this case, we will have to immediately move the turn marker down 1 space on the turn track in order to use this card. The turn marker is moved from space 9 to space 8. The card then allows us to move 3 Allied units from the Allied reinforcement box to the Allied staging area. Only ground units may be transferred to the Allied staging area. If air units are being transferred from the reinforcement box, they are placed in the Allied Air Available box instead. We will place these 3 ground units in the Allied staging area. Every Allied card has disposition instructions that tell us what to do with the card after use. In this case, we can put this card back into the Allied deck to use again during a future friendly action card phase. If there were additional steps on the card, we would hold on to the card until the end of the complete turn. The next phase is friendly reinforcement. We did not select this card this turn, but for example, certain cards, such as the Allied Logistic Effort card, allow for the replacement of eliminated or reduced Allied units. Returning ground units are placed in the Allied staging area. Returning air units are placed in the Allied Air Available box on the bottom left of the map. In this phase, we also check the Allied Air Used box. If there are any of the listed air units placed here, we get to roll a die for each unit to determine if they can return to the Air Available box. If there are no units available in the Allied Units Eliminated box, then no units are received. Since we have no eliminated units and did not actually use the Logistic Effort card, we receive no reinforcements this phase and move to the next phase. The next phase is friendly ground movement. In this phase, we can move any or all friendly ground units. Let's review some of the basic rules for movement. During the friendly movement phase, we may move some, none, or all of our friendly units. Enemy units only move as a result of combat or as directed by an action card. Units are moved one at a time. Each unit can use all, some, or none of its movement points. Unused movement points cannot be saved and carried over to another turn. Also be sure to check the terrain effects chart in the scenario rules to determine when a unit must stop, regardless of how many movement points a unit may still have remaining. The Allied staging area is located in the upper right of the map. Only Allied units can enter this space. Communist units cannot attack the space, and an unlimited number of Allied units may be stacked here. The staging area also has an airbase. Outside of the staging area, the Allies may only stack 4 ground units in a single space, including South Vietnamese units. Enemy units in the same space do not count against friendly stacking limits. Also, moving through a space does not count against the stacking limit in that space. Only units ending a phase in a space are counted. An unlimited number of air units may be placed in a space with or without allowable friendly ground units. There is no stacking limit for the Communist forces. Most Allied ground units may not enter the DMZ and Laos space indicated by red stars on the map. Allied Special Forces may enter Laos, but not the DMZ spaces. Allied B-52s, AC-47s, and airstrikes may attack anywhere on the map, but helicopters may only be placed in South Vietnam. No airborne landings are allowed in the game. During this friendly ground movement phase, we will only move our 3 ground units in the Allied staging area 1 space each into the first space on Route 9. Each of these units only has a movement allowance of 1, but because they are encountering an enemy unit, all units must stop even if they have additional movement points remaining. The enemy unit is revealed whenever friendly ground units enter their space, an air unit is placed in their space to conduct a mission, or is directed by an action card. We flip the enemy counter over to reveal an armored regiment with a firepower of 4 and a movement value of 2. Next is the friendly air movement phase. In this phase, we place available air units from the Allied Air Available box onto the map to conduct missions. No airborne landings are allowed in this scenario. We place the B-52 airstrike onto space 471 and a regular airstrike counter on space 689, where each space contains 2 enemy units. When airstrike counters are placed, the enemy counters are immediately revealed. Next is the enemy anti-aircraft artillery phase. We'll start in Communist Entrenchment Space 471 with the B-52 airstrike unit. There are no enemy anti-aircraft units in this space. However, the B-52 airstrike is unusual since it is not subject to anti-aircraft attacks even if they are present. However, you must also keep in mind that the B-52 airstrike cannot be used in a space where there are friendly ground units. Now let's resolve anti-aircraft fire in space 689. There is 1 enemy anti-aircraft artillery unit with a firepower of 3, which will fire at the US airstrike unit. To resolve anti-aircraft fire, we roll a number of 6-sided dice equal to the total anti-aircraft strength of all anti-aircraft units in the space, which in this case is 3. We roll 3 dice resulting in 1, 5, and 4. We consult the battle results table in the scenario rules and review the applicable column for anti-aircraft firing at air units. Dice results 1 and 4 have no effect, but the 5 results in eliminating 1 step from the airstrike unit. Recall that this means the counter is flipped over to its weaker side. If the unit was already on its last step, it would have been eliminated and placed in the Allied unit's eliminated box. The US airstrike's unit firepower has now been reduced from 3 to 2. If there had been more than 1 airstrike counter, we may choose which units are hit. We now conduct the friendly air attack phase. Unlike ground combat, there is no determination of tactical superiority, and there is only 1 round of bombardments. Friendly ground units in the same space are not affected. First, we line up the enemy units in order of weakest firepower first. If the firepower values are equal, the order does not matter. Then we total the number of firepower values from our air units and roll that number of dice. In this case, we'll roll 2 6-sided dice because we only have 1 air unit with a firepower value of 2. We roll a 2 and 6. We consult the third column on the battle results table and see that we have 1 miss and 1 elimination result. We then eliminate the first unit in line, which in this case is the anti-aircraft unit. No target unit may be eliminated if a weaker target unit remains. We place the destroyed unit in the OPFOR unit's eliminated box at the bottom right of the map. We then place the air unit in the Allied air used box. We then resolve our B-52 airstrike. First, we line up the enemy units in order of lowest firepower first. Since the B-52 has a firepower of 5, we can roll 5 6-sided dice. We roll a 1, 3, 3, 5, and 6. We consult the battle results table again and see that 1 enemy unit is eliminated and the other enemy unit must retreat. We eliminate the weaker unit first and place it in the OPFOR unit's eliminated box. Usually the remaining unit must retreat 1 space for each retreat result inflicted. In this case, there is only 1 retreat result, so the unit must retreat 1 space, and we can decide the direction of the retreat. However, according to the terrain key, this enemy unit is in a communist entrenchment. According to the terrain effects chart, defending communist units in this type of terrain get to ignore retreat results, so it will remain in the current location. Since our air attack is complete, we then place the B-52 unit in the air used box. Since that was the last friendly air attack, we proceed to the friendly ground combat phase. Friendly units attack any enemy units that are in the same space. The Allies are considered the attackers in this phase, and the enemy units are considered the attackers during the OPFOR ground combat phase. At this time, there is only 1 space containing friendly and enemy units. We consult the terrain effects chart to see who wins a tactical superiority tie and any effects on combat. These units are in an open space according to the terrain key. This means that the Allies will win a tactical superiority tie and there are no special effects on combat. We now resolve combat using the following steps. First, we determine tactical superiority. Combat in this game is not considered simultaneous, so if a unit is eliminated, it does not get to return fire. To determine tactical superiority, we roll one 6-sided die for each side. In this case, we roll a 2 for the Allies and a 5 for the enemy. If either side has one or more elite units indicated by an arrow on their counter, we add a 1 to their die roll. In this case, neither side has elite units, and the enemy wins tactical superiority, which means they will fire first. For the first round of ground combat, unlike air attacks, we line up the enemy units from strongest to weakest firepower. If more than one unit has the same firepower, the order does not matter. We then line up friendly allied units in any order we desire. The enemy unit won tactical superiority, so will fire first by rolling a number of dice equal to its firepower, which in this case is 4. The target for each firing unit is the first unit in line on the targeted side. A unit down the line may be targeted only if each unit before it is eliminated or retreated. The enemy rolls 4 dice, resulting in 1, 2, 6, and 6. Since the firing enemy unit is an armor unit, we must consult the first column on the battle results table. It is possible that more than one result can be applied to a single unit. The target unit is a 2-step unit, but since there are 2 6 results, the targeted allied unit receives 2 elimination results and is completely eliminated. Eliminations are applied before retreat results. If there had been just one elimination result, the target unit would have been flipped over instead of being removed from the space. Because combat is not simultaneous, the unit does not get to return fire and is removed immediately and placed in the allied unit's eliminated box. The Allies now get to return fire. Fire alternates back and forth between units until all units have fired. If one side has fewer units, the side with more units continues until all of its units have fired. Our friendly unit gets to roll 4 dice based on its firepower of 4. We roll 1 elimination and 1 retreat result, 6 and 5. Eliminations are applied before retreats, so the targeted enemy unit is removed since all enemy units are 1-step units. If there had been another enemy unit in line, the retreat result would carry over and the next unit in line would have to retreat 1 space. If there are still units from both sides remaining, a new combat round would be conducted starting with determining tactical superiority. We place the eliminated enemy unit in the red enemy eliminated box. Next, we complete the OPFOR card phase. In this phase, we draw the top card of the enemy OPFOR deck. In this case, we draw the weather card. The top right of the card indicates 0 turns are added or subtracted from using this card. The first item instructs us to replace 2 eliminated communist units from the bottom right of the map. First, we flip over the eliminated units and shuffle them for randomness. We then roll a 6-sided die for each replacement unit and consult the communist placement table in the scenario rules. We rolled a 1 and 3, so we place 1 communist unit face down in Laos and 1 face down in the DMZ's central space. The card indicates we must also perform the second step, which is to prevent the Allies from attempting to recycle used air units in the administration phase, which is the last phase in the turn. This does not include B-52s and helicopters. The disposition shows we must discard this card at the end of the turn in the discard pile, which means it may later be reshuffled into the enemy deck. We will set this card aside until the end of the turn to remind us it must be referenced during the admin phase at the end of the turn. We then proceed to the OPFOR reinforcement phase. Eliminated communist units are replaced when indicated by a card, which we completed. Next is the enemy movement phase. If a card calls for enemy movement, we follow the instructions on the card. For example, if we had drawn the communist infiltration card, we would follow the movement instructions, but since the card we drew had no movement instructions, we can proceed to the next phase. The next phase is the OPFOR combat phase. If enemy units are now in any spaces also containing friendly units, the enemy units must attack. Since there are no shared spaces, we can move on to the last phase. The last step in each turn is the administration phase. First, we move the turn marker down 1 space on the turn track. When the last turn is played, the game ends immediately. Otherwise, if any turns remain, we continue the phase. We then consult the Allied air used box, which currently has the B-52 and 1 regular airstrike unit. Normally, we would roll 1 6-sided die for each unit and consult the chart to determine if we can place that unit back in the Allied air available box for the next turn. If we roll any of the numbers in the given range, we can make the air unit available again. However, the action card we drew earlier prohibits us from recycling the regular airstrike, but we may still roll for the B-52. We roll a 1 and fail the recycle check, so the B-52 unit must remain in the used box during the next turn until we can roll again. Since we are done with the action card, we check the disposition section and place it in the enemy discard pile. Finally, all face-up communist units are then flipped face down, including the units in the red boxes on the bottom right of the map. We are then ready to start the friendly action card phase of the next turn. Here are some additional rules to keep in mind when playing Khe Sanh 68. If friendly forces, but not enemy forces, win a battle, the player can order pursuit. Only friendly units with an armor symbol may pursue. Some, none, or all qualified units in the winning force may move one land space, and they must move together. If they move into a space with more enemy units, they must attack them. If there are already friendly units in that space, they join the attack. Elite units may ignore the first retreat result each time they are fired at. The result is considered applied but has no effect. Eliminations and additional retreats are applied normally. Special forces and guerrilla units may move through enemy units without stopping. Any face-down units in that space are revealed. Guerrillas must stop in a space containing enemy special forces, but not vice versa. Each helicopter transport can carry one paratrooper, air mobile, airborne, infantry, marine, engineer, or special forces unit per move. Allied ground units which receive a retreat result may be picked up by an available helicopter transport and moved to an airbase. As long as that unit is capable of air mobile movement, the starting space has no anti-aircraft units, and the landing space has no enemy units. The 3 brigades of the 1st Cav Division can treat the following spaces as if they had airfields for helicopter movement: open spaces, hill spaces, and Allied fire bases. The AC-47 gunship can be treated as a normal airstrike, but it may also be employed during an enemy reaction combat phase if enemy units attack an Allied unit. To use the unit defensively, move it from the air available box to the space being attacked and execute anti-aircraft fire. If the gunship survives, it can perform one ground attack and then is placed in the used box. Communist units defending or attacking in jungle and hill spaces against both Allied ground and air attacks must break off if they receive a retreat or disruption result. This means placing the unit in the break-off box so that they are temporarily out of play. In the ensuing OPFOR reinforcement phase, 1 die is rolled for each unit and placed using the Communist Random Location Placement Table. If placed in a space with Allied units, reaction combat will be triggered. Finally, let's review the winning and losing conditions of the game. If at any time during the game there are Communist units in the Khe Sanh firebase with no Allied ground units, the game ends immediately as a strategic defeat. Otherwise, you play until you run out of game turns. Then consult the victory point schedule and the scenario rules to determine your score. Victory points are added or subtracted based on the number and type of spaces occupied by the Allies at the end of the game and eliminated units. A space is considered occupied by the Allies if at least one Allied unit occupies it at the end of the game. A unit is considered eliminated if it is in the eliminated box at the end of the game. You do not count units eliminated, but return to play as replacements. After you finalize your score, you can determine if you have won a strategic or tactical victory or suffered a tactical defeat. This concludes this review of Khe Sanh 68. Visit us at these sites and don't forget to leave a comment to share your experience with the game or to let us know what games you'd like to see reviewed. And if you'd like to experience something more exciting than fending off the Tet Offensive, stick around for our disclaimer. Coming up next.